Hi friends, it's Miss Adamson. Today we are continuing our lessons on shapes, and I'm going to give you part 1 of this lesson, and then tomorrow you're going to hear Miss Palmer give you part 2, okay? So there's 3 things we need to talk about today. The first is we are going to talk about square angles, and I know we've counted our angles and looked at angles, and today we're going to learn about a specific kind of angle and how to tell if it is a square angle. After we talk about square angles, we're going to learn about parallel lines, how to draw them, how do you know if they're parallel lines, and then we're going to talk about our first shape, the trapezoid. And by first shape, I know we've talked about all of these shapes, but the trapezoid has 4 sides, so it's going to be the first quadrilateral that we talk about, okay? But first, let's talk about square angles. Now, square angles have the word square in it. So I want you to think to yourself about what a square looks like. Think in your head what a square looks like, and then I want you to think, do the angles look like these angles? These angles are small and they're kind of pinched together. Are those what angles on a square look like? Now, you're probably thinking, no, angles on a square kind of look like an L, the shape of an L. And you're exactly right. Square angles, I drew them on here, are angles like this. They are perfect angles that meet in the shape of an L on the corner. So all squares have angles that look like this, and you can tell if something is a square angle by holding up a piece of paper or a square to the corner, to the angle, and seeing if it matches up. So for example, I have our nice class book here that I got. Took it home with me so I could always read it. And I want to know if this angle right here is a square angle. So I'm going to hold up my paper right to it, and look at that. It fits perfectly. So that is a square angle. Now let's look at some other shapes that we have already drawn. Let's look at this shape. This is one of our pentagons. And I want us to think, sorry, this tape is all messed up, where we might find a square angle. So if we hold it up to this angle right here, I'm going to actually put it in front. We know that this angle right here is not a square angle because it doesn't come together at the point of an L. But if we check over here, this angle is a square angle because look, it matches up. It's not perfect because Miss Adamson didn't use straight lines to make this. It matches up perfectly, so this is a square angle. The reason I said right angle is because when I was in 2nd grade, I learned it was called a right angle, but for now we are going to call them square angles. Let's see. I think that's all we needed to talk about. Let's just compare it up to here. See, that's a square angle. This is a square angle. So it's when, again, 2 lines of a shape come together and meet at a corner that is exactly the shape of an L. Okay? So to remind us, I'm going to just draw I'm actually going to use this so that it's perfect, a square angle on our board. And a lot of the times we mark our square angles with a square. So this is a square angle. I just drew it. I know it's a square angle because I know that this piece of paper has 4 square angles. Okay, that's what makes it a rectangle, but Miss Palmer's going to talk to you about that tomorrow, okay? I'm just giving you the background information. So now we need to talk about something else that's very important when we draw our shapes. And that's really what I'm preparing you for. So I'm giving you some tools, square angles, and parallel lines to draw shapes. I'm going to go over one shape with you, and then Miss Palmer's going to go over some other shapes with you. And you're going to need to know square angles and parallel lines. Now, parallel lines, I want everyone at home watching to hold up 2 arms like this. This is kind of how we should represent parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that can continue on forever and ever and ever, and they're never going to touch, which means these are not parallel lines, because if I keep going and keep going and keep going, eventually the lines are going to touch. But parallel lines can keep going forever and ever and ever and ever, and the distance between them is always going to stay the same, so they're never, ever, ever going to touch. So I have my rulers here because I know that these are perfectly straight lines. So again, parallel lines are 2 lines that will never, ever, ever, ever touch. Would this be parallel lines? Think to yourself. I'll give you a couple seconds. Would these 2 lines be parallel? If you said no, you are exactly correct, because watch, if you keep going, they're going to touch. So we are going to practice drawing these parallel lines. And to draw parallel lines, it's actually very easy. You first just need a straight edge, a ruler. And first you draw 1 line straight down. Okay? Once you draw 1 line, all you have to do is move your ruler like this. You don't move it any other way but to the side to show that this distance between the lines will never ever change. So these are parallel because if I continue drawing this line all the way up and all the way down, I'm going to use this ruler to help me show you, all the way up or all the way down, they're never going to touch. So that's why they're called parallel lines. They will never, ever, ever touch. Another trick to drawing parallel lines with your ruler is to just hold your ruler in one place, draw a line on one side, and then draw a line on the other side. We know that a ruler is always this distance apart from each other, the 2 sides. So if I draw a line on one side and then a line on the other, these are also parallel lines because this distance is the same and these lines will never touch. So if I kept going and kept going and kept going, the lines will never, ever, ever touch like this. Now, I have a question. What if I drew the lines like this? Are these parallel lines? If you said yes, you are correct, because look, even if they're sideways, if I continue to draw them this way and down, of course I would use a ruler, they're never going to touch, even if I kept going all the way down, okay? So that's one way to draw parallel lines. Now, another question I have is, are these 2 lines parallel? And if you said yes, or if you're confused, that's okay. Yes, these lines are parallel because watch. I can just extend, which means to keep drawing, this line, and these lines are parallel because as I keep drawing them, they will never, ever, ever touch. Okay, so just like these 2, these lines have the same distance and they will never, never, never touch. So if you're home and if you have a piece of paper and if you have a ruler, why don't you go ahead and practice drawing some parallel lines? You can use the ruler trick where you just draw lines on both sides like this. Those will always give you parallel lines. Or you can practice drawing parallel lines where you draw a line Then you move your ruler and draw another line. Okay? What you can't do is, I'm just going to erase this one so I can use this spot, is draw a line, move your ruler not carefully, and then draw a line like this. Because these lines are not parallel. These lines, if I keep extending them, let me show you. If I keep extending these lines, if I follow it, these lines are going to touch. These lines will never, never, never touch. But this one, because it's a little bit crooked, it will end up touching, okay? So we've now talked about square angles. We've talked about parallel lines. And now we're on to our last topic for today. I'm going to just erase some of these. That's my washcloth. Don't have a fancy eraser. I'm going to leave one set of parallel lines up here. So we have our square angles are right here. Our parallel lines are right here. This is not a parallel line. And now we're going to talk about our first shape, the trapezoid. The trapezoid, just like our animals have characteristics, just like triangles, quadrilaterals, pentagons, and hexagons have characteristics, we also have shapes that have characteristics. So the two characteristics, or the one characteristic of a trapezoid, is that it has one pair of parallel lines. Oops. What I mean by pair is this is a pair, two lines, okay? This is one pair. If there was another set, that would be two pairs. This is one pair of parallel lines. Let me give you an example. I'm going to draw one for you. Here is one pair of parallel lines. And I know they're parallel because I used my ruler. I kept them the same distance apart. Now, that means that the other lines can't be parallel. So, they can just be wherever. These lines are not parallel because, watch, if I line them up and I keep moving them, they touch. So, trapezoids have one pair of parallel lines. So, let's use this example. Here is one pair of parallel lines. So, I can just draw a line here and a line here. I'm going to erase this. And again, I have a trapezoid because it just has one pair of parallel lines. Okay? Now, just like triangles can all look different, quadrilaterals can look different, pentagons can look different, hexagons can look different, there can be different kinds of trapezoids. So I actually want to give you, or practice, identifying and deciding if shapes are trapezoids, okay? So let's talk about this shape. I want you to think to yourself, does this shape have one pair of parallel lines? And before I should keep going, I should say that a trapezoid is also a quadrilateral. So it has two characteristics. It has one pair of parallel lines, and it is a quadrilateral. Okay? Always have four sides and four angles, and of these four sides, two of them are parallel. So let's go back and look at the shape. It's definitely a quadrilateral because it has four sides. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I know it's a quadrilateral now. I'm thinking to myself, is it a trapezoid? Let's test. We have one pair of parallel lines because I see that this line up here and this line came from my ruler. And I know, let's do this. just going to put it over here. I know that if I extend the lines, they're never, ever, ever going to touch. Okay, let me do that again. These two lines, never, ever, ever going to touch, okay? Now we have to decide if this is one pair of parallel lines. Are these two lines parallel? Let's check. Let's see. Oh, look, our lines cross. So, this shape is a quadrilateral, and it has one pair of parallel lines, which means we have a trapezoid. Let's try another one. This one's going to be tricky, but I know Miss Palmer's going to talk about it tomorrow, okay? This shape, I know these two lines are parallel on the top and the bottom, because if we keep them here, they can keep going on forever and they'll never touch. But what about the other two sides? Are these two sides parallel? Yes, because they'll keep going and they'll never, never, never touch. So, I know the shape is a quadrilateral, but it has two pairs of parallel lines, which means it is not a trapezoid. I'm going to leave this one up because we know it's a trapezoid. Now let's do one more example because I know this video is getting a little bit long. Let's do this example. Is this a trapezoid? I'm going to let you think to yourself. Let's test. Well, it fits my ruler, so I know that this top line and this bottom line, or these two sides, are never going to touch. So there's one pair of parallel lines right here. But let's check the sides. If I line up my rulers, oh no, look, they touch. So I have a quadrilateral because I have four sides and I have four angles, and I have one pair of parallel lines. So, friends, is this a trapezoid? And I really hope you all said yes, it is a trapezoid. So I know that was super long, but we did cover everything we needed to. Square angles, remember, look like the shape of an L, like this. Parallel lines, two lines that never touch. I'm just going to redraw them like this, but of course you would use a ruler. And then we talked about trapezoids, and trapezoids are quadrilaterals, which means they have four sides and four angles, and two of those sides are one pair of parallel lines, okay? We have a seesaw activity for you to do after this. It is called April 2nd Math, and Miss Palmer is going to continue tomorrow talking about different shapes, also talking about square angles and parallel lines, so if you're confused, don't worry. She will give you more lessons on it tomorrow. You guys are becoming shape experts, and I know you're going to do great on this fun seesaw activity, okay? Thank you.